Martian Manhunter number 1 and had Stranger on Earth Saga. 1. God's Monsters and Mortals, Part 3. Earth 1, Mars was dying. For generations, the green Martians and white Martians had fought one another. The war had consumed cities. It had destroyed families. It had turned the red planet into a battlefield. John Jones had spent most of his life trying to stay away from it. He had seen enough fighting, enough blood, enough hatred, but nothing prepared him for what happened next. John stepped outside one morning and immediately noticed something was wrong. The sky was redder than usual. Smoke rose from the horizon. There was screaming in the distance. John looked toward the horizon. Something was coming. A massive army. But these weren't green Martians. They weren't white Martians either. They were red Martians. John froze. Red Martians. He had heard stories, legends, stories about creatures from the deepest parts of Mars, but he had never seen one. Then he saw him. A massive red Martian stood in the middle of the battlefield. He was enormous. His body was covered. Martian Manhunter number 1, The Last Martian Saga. 1. God's Monsters and Mortals, Part 3. Earth 1. Mars was already dying. The war between the green Martians and the white Martians had been going on for generations. What had once been a conflict between two peoples had become something much worse. Cities had been destroyed, forests had burned, entire populations had disappeared. John Jones had spent much of his life trying to stay away from the conflict. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a politician. He was simply a Martian trying to survive. But on the day everything ended, John walked outside. The sky above Mars was red, not the normal red of the planet, a deeper red, a violent red. John looked toward the horizon. Something was coming. Then he saw them. Red Martians. Thousands of them. They poured into the city like an invading army. Martians ran, some tried to fight, others simply bowed. John looked toward the center of the destruction. There stood something unlike anything he'd ever seen. A gigantic red alien. He was covered in scars and blood. His eyes burned with hatred. In one hand, he held the spine of a white Martian. Around him were the bodies of dead Martians. Green, white. It didn't matter. They were all dead. Several red Martians dropped to their knees before him. John stared. What is that? The creature lifted the spine. Then he spoke, with blood and rage of crimson red. His voice echoed through the ruined city. Ripped from a corpse so freshly dead. The red Martians raised their weapons. Together with our hellish hate. The creature's eyes burned brighter. We'll burn you all, that is your fate. Then he opened his mouth. A torrent of fire erupted from it. John's eyes widened. The fire consumed an entire building. Martians screamed. John realized something. This wasn't a war. This wasn't revenge. This was extermination. John turned and ran. He used his telepathy to search for survivors. Run. Get away. Don't fight. There's nothing you can do. The screams became louder. The city disappeared behind him. John looked back one last time. Mars was burning. He didn't know the name of the creature. He didn't know where it had come from. He didn't know why it had come. He only knew that whatever it was, it had destroyed his home. John fled. Somehow, John escaped Mars. He didn't know exactly how. His memories of the journey were fractured. Fire, screaming, ships, stars. Then Earth. John arrived on a world he knew almost nothing about. A world filled with people, humans. He watched them from a distance. They were strange. They were fragile. But they reminded him of home. John needed an identity. He found a man, a human named John Jones. A detective, a man whose life had ended tragically. John took his appearance, his memories, his identity, and became John Jones. A detective. A human. At least, that's what everyone else believed. Years later, Gotham City, rain poured over the streets. Detective John Jones walked through an alley carrying a folder. He looked at the photographs inside. Homeless people, dozens of them, men, women, young adults, older people, all missing. John stared at one photograph. Where are they going? His partner shrugged. That's what we're trying to figure out. John looked toward the alley. No witnesses? Not one. Any bodies? No. Vehicles? Nothing. John closed the folder. Then somebody is taking them. His partner looked at him. That's what I'm thinking. John looked toward the city. Something isn't right. He could feel minds around him. Hundreds. Thousands. Gotham was always loud inside his head. Fear, anger, hunger, greed, sadness. He had learned to shut most of it out. But one thought caught his attention. Help me. John stopped. He turned. Nothing. Please. John's eyes narrowed. Someone was nearby. That night, John was walking home when he heard shouting. Give me the wallet. John turned. Two men had cornered someone in an alley, a mugging. John started walking toward them. Leave him alone. One of the criminals looked at him. Mind your business. I'm a police officer. The criminal laughed. Then show me your badge. John reached for it. The other criminal pulled a gun. Don't move. John stared at the gun. He could hear the man's thoughts. Shoot him. John's eyes widened. The gun fired. John moved. The bullet passed through him. The mugger stared. What the? John floated several inches off the ground. The criminals backed away. What are you? John's body changed. His skin turned green. His eyes became completely red. His clothes transformed with him. He grew taller, stronger. The criminal stared in terror. John grabbed the gun. It bent in his hand. You shouldn't have done that. The first criminal ran. John vanished, then reappeared in front of him. The criminal screamed. John grabbed him and gently threw him against a dumpster. The second criminal fired again. John became intangible. The bullets passed through him. John appeared behind the man. He grabbed him. Don't. The criminal dropped the gun. John let him go. The mugging victim stared at him. John slowly returned to his human form. Are you all right? The victim couldn't speak. John looked around. He could hear sirens. They saw me. John's expression changed. They know. The FBI arrived before John could disappear. Black vehicles surrounded the alley. Agents stepped out with weapons drawn. Get on the ground. John raised his hands. I can explain. Get down. John looked into the minds around him. Fear, confusion, orders. They didn't understand him. One agent whispered, What the hell is he? John looked at him. I'm not your enemy. Then what are you? John hesitated. He didn't know how to answer. An agent fired. John became intangible. Another fired. John flew upward. Agent screamed. He's flying. John tried to escape, but the FBI had prepared. A strange device activated. Energy surrounded him. John dropped. He hit the ground. His powers weakened. What is this? He tried to become intangible. Nothing happened. He tried to read their minds. The signal interfered. He tried to move. His strength failed him. Several agents surrounded him. John looked up. Please. An agent pointed his weapon at him. Stay down. John stared at the humans surrounding him. For the first time since leaving Mars, he felt completely alone. He looked toward the sky. Somewhere beyond it was Mars. His home, his people, his family. Gone. John closed his eyes. I am the last. He opened them again. The FBI agents dragged him away. Inside the FBI facility, John was placed inside a reinforced cell. He sat alone. He looked through the glass. Humans watched him, studied him, feared him. John could hear their thoughts. Alien, threat, weapon, experiment. John lowered his head. He thought about Mars, the green Martians, the white Martians, the fire, the red creature, the words, with blood and rage of crimson red. John didn't know who that creature was. He didn't know what had happened to his world. He didn't know why it had come. And he certainly didn't know anything about the strange forces that existed beyond Earth. He only knew one thing. He was alive. And as long as he was alive, Mars wasn't completely forgotten. John Jones stared into the darkness. My name is John Jones. He paused. But that's not who I am. His eyes glowed red. I'm the last Martian. And his story had only just begun. Green Lantern Emerald Twilight number 3. The Icicle Earth 2, Saga 1, Gods, Monsters, and Mortals, Part 3. The winter wind swept through the city. Alan Scott stood on the roof of a downtown building, looking over the streets below. He had been the Green Lantern for some time now, but every night seemed to bring something stranger. He had fought criminals who thought they could challenge him. He had stopped armed robberies. He had saved people from fires. He had even begun to understand the strange green light that had chosen him. But that night, something different was coming. Alan felt the temperature drop. He looked at his breath. It had become visible. That's not normal. The street below suddenly froze. Cars stopped. People screamed as ice spread across the pavement. Alan jumped from the rooftop. His green light surrounded him, slowing his fall before he landed. He looked around. Ice covered everything. Then he heard footsteps. A man walked through the frozen street. He wore a white and blue costume with a heavy coat, gloves, and goggles. Ice formed around his hands. Alan raised his ring. Who are you? The man smiled. Somebody who doesn't appreciate being interrupted. Alan stared at him. You're the one doing this? Obviously. The man raised his hand. A blast of freezing energy shot toward Alan. Alan created a green shield. The ice slammed against it. Alan pushed forward. The shield shattered. He rolled across the frozen pavement. Okay. Alan stood. That answers that. The man laughed. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Alan raised his ring. Then enlighten me. The man raised both hands. My name is Jor Makent. Ice began forming around him. But you can call me. He smiled. Icicle. Alan stared. That's your name? Icicle frowned. You have something better? Alan smiled. I'll think about it. Icicle attacked. A wave of ice exploded across the street. Alan flew upward. The ice passed underneath him. He created a green beam and fired it at Icicle. Icicle raised an ice wall. The beam struck it. The wall cracked. Icicle looked surprised. Alan landed? Your turn. Alan formed a giant green fist. It slammed into Icicle. Icicle flew through a storefront. Alan ran after him. Icicle suddenly appeared behind him. Alan turned. Too late. Icicle grabbed his shoulder. Ice spread across Alan's costume. Alan looked down. That's cold. Icicle threw him through a car. Alan rolled across the street. The civilians nearby screamed. Alan immediately stood. He looked around. People were trapped. A bus had frozen to the ground. Alan raised his ring. Hold on. A green energy field surrounded the bus. Alan lifted it. The ice cracked. The bus came free. Alan moved it away from the civilians. Icicle watched. You could have attacked me. Alan looked at him. People were in danger. Icicle smiled. Icicle, that's your weakness. Alan's expression hardened. No. He raised his ring. That's the reason I'm here. The green light erupted around him. Icicle fired another freezing blast. Alan flew directly through it. His ring generated a green barrier around his body. He punched Icicle. Icicle stumbled. Alan followed with another punch, then another. Icicle blocked the fourth. Ice formed around Alan's arm. Icicle pulled him closer. You can't defeat Winter. Alan smiled. I don't have to. His ring began glowing brighter. I just have to stop you. Alan created a giant green furnace around Icicle. The ice began melting. Icicle screamed. Alan released the construct. Icicle fell to the pavement. Alan landed beside him. Icicle tried to stand. Alan formed green restraints around his wrists. You've had enough. Icicle looked up. This isn't over. Alan looked at him. Then I'll be ready. Sirens approached. Icicle looked toward them. You think the police can hold me? Alan glanced at the approaching officers. Probably not. Icicle smiled. Then why aren't you taking me somewhere yourself? Alan looked at his ring. I've got better things to do. He lifted into the air. Icicle watched the green lantern disappear into the night. One of the officers approached him. What do we call this guy? Another officer looked at the frozen street. I heard him call himself Icicle. The first officer looked up. Of course he did. High above the city, Alan flew through the clouds. He looked down at the streets. Icicle. Another strange enemy. Another reminder that the world was changing. Alan looked at his ring. The emerald light glowed against the darkness. He still didn't understand where the ring's power came from. He didn't understand why it had chosen him. But he understood one thing. If people were in danger, he would answer. Alan Scott looked toward the horizon. I guess I'm going to have to get used to this. The Green Lantern disappeared into the night. Batman Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 17.2. Christmas Miracle, Part 1. Saga 1, God's Monsters and Mortals, Part 3, Earth 1. The sub-Batcave beneath Otisburg was quiet. Bruce Wayne sat on the edge of the medical table, still wrapped in fresh bandages from his encounter with Deadshot. Alfred stood in front of him with his arms folded. No, Bruce looked up. I didn't say anything. You were about to. Bruce sighed. I need to go back out. No, you need to rest. Alfred, Master... Batman Gotham's Night, Volume 3, Number 17.2. Christmas Miracle Saga. 1. God's Monsters and Mortals, Part 3, Earth 1. Alfred Pennyworth stood in the middle of the sub-Batcave with his arms folded. Bruce was sitting on the medical table. His side was still bandaged from his encounter with Deadshot. You are staying here. Bruce looked at him. Alfred? No, I can still... No. Bruce sighed. Alfred pointed toward him. You were shot. I know. You lost blood. I know. You were attacked by an assassin. I know. And you were nearly knocked unconscious. Bruce looked away. I know. Alfred sighed. Then why am I having to explain this? Bruce didn't answer. Alfred walked toward the computer. I'm going to check on Dr. Tompkins. Bruce looked up. How is she? Still unconscious. Bruce's expression hardened. Let me know if anything changes. I will. Alfred picked up his coat. And when I return, I expect you to still be sitting right there. Bruce nodded. I will. Alfred gave him a suspicious look. Master Bruce, I'm serious. Alfred stared at him for another moment. Then he left. The door closed. Bruce waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. He looked toward the back computer. Nothing. No emergency calls, no major crimes, no reports. Bruce slowly stood. His side hurt. He ignored it. Sorry, Alfred. He put on the batsuit. I'll stay close. Bruce climbed into the elevator. The doors closed. Gotham was strangely quiet. Batman stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. He activated the police communications. Nothing. No murders, no robberies, no major fires, no reports involving Black Mask. Nothing. Batman looked across the city. This is strange. He checked again. Nothing. He looked at the snow falling around him. Christmas Eve was almost here. Batman shook his head. This is a Christmas miracle. He almost smiled. Then he heard shouting. 3 men were running down the street, rioting. Batman jumped from the rooftop. He landed behind them. One of them turned. What the? Batman fired his Batclaw. The cable wrapped around the man's legs. Batman pulled. The man went flying backward. He slammed onto the pavement. Batman walked toward him. Stay down. The second rider charged. Batman fired the Batclaw again. The cable wrapped around his chest. Batman pulled. The man flew toward him. Batman stepped aside. The rider slammed into a wall. Batman caught him before he fell, then dropped him. The third man raised his fists. You think you're tough? Batman looked at him. The man charged. Batman kicked him directly in the face. The man dropped. Batman looked at the 3 unconscious rioters. He checked them. Alive. He activated his communicator. 3 rioters near the downtown district. Send someone to pick them up. Batman turned away. He looked toward Gotham. No Black Mask. No Deadshot. No Firefly. No Holiday Killer. For once, nothing. Batman stood on the rooftop. The city was quiet. He almost didn't know what to do with himself. Maybe Alfred was right. He looked at his injured side. Maybe I should stay home. Batman fired his grapnel. The line caught the next building. He disappeared into the night. Hours later, Alfred returned to the Sub-Batcave. He carried a small medical bag. He walked toward the medical area. Master Bruce? No answer. Alfred stopped. The medical table was empty. The batsuit was gone. Alfred closed his eyes. Oh, Master Bruce. He looked toward the Bat computer. The system showed that Batman had left. Alfred sighed. He wasn't surprised. He was upset. But he understood. Bruce had never been good at sitting still while Gotham needed him. Alfred placed the medical bag down. He simply can't help himself. He looked toward the empty elevator. Still, Alfred smiled faintly. I suppose that's why he became Batman. He walked toward the computer. And why I worry about him. The cave fell silent. Outside, snow continued falling. Christmas was almost here.